The Logic Exchange returns with a conversation that challenges a fundamental assumption in legal marketing that the job ends when the lead signs. In this episode, Inside the Business of Law, from lead to lifelong client, the retention shift, we're joined by special guest Ross Buntrock, a seasoned trial lawyer with more than 3 decades of experience in complex litigation, mass torts, and consumer protection. From his roots on the South Dakota family farm to leading high stakes litigation in Washington, D.C., Ross brings a rare blend of work ethic, legal depth, and strategic perspective. As a partner at Sweetnam Schuster Schartz, he chairs the Mass Tort, Mass Arbitration, and class action practice, representing clients in major cases involving defective drugs, dangerous products, and corporate misconduct, including ongoing litigation around Roundup, Zantac, and Talc. But what sets Ross apart is his full spectrum view of the legal ecosystem. Having spent part of his career on the defense side at AmLaw 100 firms and practicing before federal agencies and appellate courts, he understands how cases are won and lost from every angle. In this episode, we move beyond acquisition metrics and dig into what actually builds durable firm value, client experience, trust, and long-term engagement. From TCPA compliance to data privacy and evolving consumer expectations, Ross shares why retention, not just intake, is becoming the defining advantage for modern law firms. If you're still measuring success by signed cases alone, this conversation will shift your perspective. Let's jump right in. Welcome, Ross.
Thank you. Nice to be here.
Absolutely. Thank you for taking the time. So we'll jump right into to kind of the first section, which is partner strategy, evaluation, and lead origin. So how do you vet and choose your marketing and or intake partners in this evolving landscape?
Honestly, Nick, I mean, it's very similar to the way clients choose law firms. I got into the space, not that long ago, in the last decade, and like people who like the same way that people select their lawyers, I selected my vendors based on referrals from trusted sources, mostly. Obviously, I did my own research and vetted them, with metrics and diligence on my own side. But a really good referral from a trusted source is the sine qua non of, I think, a great way to find vendors that you want to work with. So that's how I've gone about it. And in the same way that we're discussing, how you cultivate and curate client relationships, the same thing is true for lawyers and their vendors. I mean, lawyers like me can't do their jobs without, sophisticated, trustworthy vendors. And, that's how I started. And that's been kind of my North Star ever since.
Awesome. I love that. It's definitely a symbiotic partnership, right? You have to have folks that not only that you like, but that you trust and that you can kind of hang your hat on what they say. And that's a really good kind of segue into the second question in partner strategy, evaluation, and lead origin. What separates a basic vendor relationship from a true strategic partnership in this space, in your opinion?
I mean, at the risk of being repetitive, I think it's people or persons who demonstrate, deep knowledge, deep trust, based on, just not only our relationship, but again, the relationships that those folks have with people that I know well, or, even second and third degree connections. And I think the other differentiation point is folks who are, again, not just, here to sell you something, but you actually have and develop a friendship over time that goes beyond and transcends, business or transactions or leads or deals. And so that's, I mean, I've been lucky to have that experience on a number of occasions where folks I've worked with have become genuine friends, and folks that I actually look forward to seeing, whether it's at a conference or, if we happen to be in the same city, we get together, grab a drink, grab dinner, whatever. I mean, that to me is really the ideal, and what, it's hard to know if that's going to happen at the outset. But it's really nice when it does. And I, whether it's fortuitousness or calculation, who knows? But I've been lucky to benefit from those kinds of relationships since I got into the space.
Absolutely. And I love that. I feel the same way. There are so many times when I kind of pinch myself. I'm like, okay, so these guys are actually like my friends now, right? And
Yeah.
when I first walked into those rooms, 15 years ago, it was definitely I was very intimidated, right? Like it was like, oh my gosh, there's Michael Watts, and oh, there's Mike Papantonio, right? And it was like these larger than life figures, and just over the course of time, they've become really good friends. Ann Andrews definitely intimidated the crap out of me when I first met her, and now she's a friend, and I think that's amazing. And likewise for you, it was when we were first put together by Gary Rothkopf, who is not only my oldest friend in this space, figuratively and literally, but it was very fortuitous because I think that we've gotten along well. We actually haven't worked on anything together yet, but hoping someday that works out. And if it doesn't, that's okay too, right? I feel like I gained a friend in this. So thank you. I appreciate it.
100% same. And yeah, I mean, we're all living life, and in addition to running our businesses and all the things that are front and center when you're looking at someone's LinkedIn profile. But then you get to know the person, you get to understand the good, the bad, the ups and the downs, and that's a nice thing to have too.
Absolutely, man. I completely agree with you. So the last bit in this section, what information should a firm always ask a marketing partner before working with them?
Well, I guess, I mean, again, this is a theme here, but I always try to get, in the same way that I do when I'm hiring someone or working with someone as a contractor or, a hire. I like to get, some referrals and some references. That's the first and foremost thing that I think is important. Um, Also, I mean, and again, at the risk of sounding trite, I like to understand kind of like what drives folks to do what they do, right? I mean, there are no shortage of folks out here in not just in this space, but in the world writ large, whose main and only focus is, making a buck. And
Mhm.
I'm more interested, kind of consistent with the theme of this podcast, in developing a long-term relationship
Mhm.
that's based on something that goes beyond and transcends just, the business to business transaction. And so, it's kind of a little bit speaking to culture and motivation. Um, I think those things are important. You also, I think, want to have a pretty good understanding as to, again, how they go about staffing, how they run their businesses, um, and the people that work for them, are they happy? Are they doing a great job? Are they showing up in the best way possible? Because look, I mean, at the end of the day, whether it's a lead gen or an intake center, these folks are representing you, and they
Mhm.
are you for all intents and purposes. And so you want someone who's, saying your name when they pick up the phone or when they are acquiring that client, that is operating in a way that is consistent with your values and the way you do business and the way you treat your clients. And that's really, I think, questions that kind of get to that ultimate conclusion of that question being answered are the questions I try to ask.
Awesome. I love that. I love that. And that's a good way to kind of roll into section two, which is lessons learned and ethical sourcing. And I'd like to start this section with a little bit of a story. So it has nothing to do with my time in the legal arena. So in between my sophomore and junior years in college, I was at Western State, played baseball there in Gunnison, Colorado, and I was studying to be a school teacher. Actually, a major in psychology, minor in teaching. I haven't taught a day in my life unless you count some of the courses that I've done, right? But I worked for a general contractor in the Vail Valley. In the summertime, my dad owned a floor covering company out there, and put in a good word, and I came in as their marketing assistant, and I'm using the air quotes because I was really just the gopher. And one of my main jobs was to meet the clients and take them to lunch and go to the job site and just basically kind of chauffeur them around. And I don't know if you ever spend any time in Vail, but obviously I-70 runs right in front of it, and you've got your ski resort on the south side, and then on the north side, a lot of homes and whatnot, right? And this gentleman was building a home on the north side, and he shows up in this old to the office in this really old F-150. Like, I would think it was cool now, but back then I was like, what is this guy driving? And he literally had a lazy boy in the bed of it, and I was like, what is this, right? And he goes, hey Nick, can we go to, because I'd already met him a couple of times. He's like, hey Nick, can we go to the job site? And I was like, absolutely. All that's done right now, we've done the footers and the foundation, and they've started framing. And he goes, oh, that's perfect. And I was like, all right, cool. So we drive up there, we're listening to the radio and just kind of BSing about everything. And we get up there, and he asked me to help unload this chair, and I was like, okay. So I'm carrying this thing into what is going to be the living room, and he sits down in it, and sits there for about 15 minutes, and he's very fidgety. He's leaning one side, he's leaning to the other, he's moving, he's doing all these things. And I was like, all right, man. I mean, he's building a very nice custom home. And I was like, all right, customer, Mr. Guy, fine. And he calls me back up, and he goes, hey, after about 15 minutes, he goes, hey Nick, can you help me load this thing back up? And I was like, sure, okay. And he's very quiet, very pensive, very just kind of to himself, and he's normally a pretty boisterous guy. And we're in the truck, and we're driving back, and I'm like, okay, something went wrong. Like, what happened? And he literally out of the blue just said, this won't do. And I was like, well, what won't do? And he said, call everybody and have them meet us in the conference center. And I was like, okay. And so we did, and we get there, and I'm like, oh my God, like, I did something wrong. I'm about to get fired. This guy's mad at me, everything else. And it had nothing to do with me. He calls everybody in and says those same words, this won't do. And Chupa, who was the owner, was like, well, what does that mean? And he told him the house was off on his view that he wanted by about 15 degrees. And keep in mind, footers done, foundation done. They had already started framing it. Long story short, it all had to be torn down and redone. And I don't even know the cost, right? This was in the early 2000s, so who knows, right? Like, and that has stuck with me my entire career. And it is deliver the view the customer wants. I don't care if you're building a home. I don't care if you are detailing cars. I don't care if you're producing claimant retainers with med records, whatever it might be. Deliver the view that the customer wants, because at the end of the day, that's all that you can do. You have your word. You said that you're going to do the thing. Do that thing. And I think that that's a very good segue into this next section, because it's something that has been near and dear to my heart. And keep in mind, I've told that story probably 15 times over the course of some of these speeches and things that I've done, but I've never done it here on the podcast. And I think it's a good reminder for all of us, right? Like, for yourself, for me, for anybody that might be listening. Which, by the way, anybody out there, if you like what you're hearing, and please like and subscribe. Tell some of your friends. We're gonna have some really cool guests as we continue. And again, Ross, thank you for being on. But this section is lessons learned and ethical sourcing, right? So that first part, lessons learned, that was one of the biggest lessons that I learned, and I was probably 20 years old, and it stuck with me my entire career, delivering the view that the client wants. So thank you for going on that journey with me. What are the biggest do's and don'ts that you've learned in legal marketing over the course of your career?
Well, no, and that's a great story. I mean, I think that speaks to, Nick, I mean, kind of what every lawyer I think has to keep in mind, which is you do have to manage your clients' expectations, and you do need to deliver what's promised, and you have to do that, um, you know, kind of no matter what.
Yep.
And so, I mean, even when it might cost you, or cost you something, it might completely destroy the economics of the case or the transaction or whatever it might be. So yeah, it's a great story and a great reminder. Um, I think for me, in terms of lessons learned, there are a few. And I think it goes to these lessons can be applied, across the board in a number of different spheres of one's life. But, and again, nothing super, novel or new, but number one is if it sounds too good to be true, it probably is, right?
Yeah.
So if someone comes to you, promising the moon and the stars and the sun, at a price or in a way that sounds like it might be really like out of line with what you might be expecting, you're probably, talking to somebody who either doesn't fully understand what their obligations are as a marketer, how to do it right, or how to deliver you a product, or not a product, but a client that is going to be a client that's worth the investment that you're making in that particular lead. So that's number one. I guess the other thing that I think about is, and, and this is kind of separate from lessons, but it's kind of like treating your vendors like a witness that you're going to have to defend, right? You're going to have to answer for and vouch for the actions of these folks who, again, are out there acting in your name and using your name when they pick up, when a phone's picked up, or when a lead is received from whatever means or whatever media. And so, making sure that those folks are, again, understanding who you are, what's important to you, how you want these clients to be treated, and potential clients. I think making sure that you're aligned in that respect, is of utmost importance, because look, I've been in this business, I've been a lawyer for 31 years this year.
That's
And
awesome.
yeah, it's kind of remarkable and kind of frightening to acknowledge that's how long it's been. But I also take great pride in the fact that I've never had a complaint of any form or fashion, lodged against me, and I never plan to. Um, but in this day and age where, people are much more accessible and you're much more discoverable online, people can really, if people are dissatisfied, they can make your life difficult. So you want to be sure that you're out there with your best foot forward, and that your vendors are acting and performing just as you would. And if they're not doing that, if they are motivated by something other than delivering great service, then you should forego that relationship, or sever that relationship if it seemed great and then it turned out not to be. Nothing's worth your reputation. You can't. It's very difficult to recover that. That's your word and your good name is really the only good. It is the only thing you've got at the end of the day. And those are lessons that my parents taught me and their parents taught them, and the same is true today.
Absolutely. I completely agree with you. People remember the way that you treat them. And especially, and it's, I've said this a couple times on the podcast, but it was a good reminder for me. Earlier this year, we were at NTL, and we were having our own event. It was a dinner and drinks and hanging out and everything else, and it happened to be at the same time as another event. And I invite all my friends that I know that are going to be there to come to these things, and I want to see them and hang out. And I actually had invited Harlan Skillinger, and he actually wrote me back and was like, "Nick, I'm offended." And I was like, "Whoa, why?" And it happened to be during something that he was doing, right? And I didn't know that, right? But it was something that he was doing at the time, and it was, he saw it as a competing situation. And I was like, "No, I'm so sorry," yada yada yada. And we ended up tweaking our thing to fix it. And he said, "Nick, number one, I truly appreciate you, you taking care of that. He goes, everybody makes mistakes, but it's how you clean them up that matters. And I really took that to heart because it's true. Nobody's perfect in this, but people remember the way that you treat them. And had I just been like, Harlan, look, tough shit, right? Like that wouldn't have gone where. No, not only would I never do that, he's a friend of mine, but that's just not the way to approach that situation. And I take that to heart in that it's if you make a mistake, own it, number one. Don't try to hide it. And then clean it up to the best of your ability. And people will remember that. And it goes a long way. Appreciate you saying that a second ago. When we're talking about volume, right? Like the biggest thing that people want right now is how do we scale? How do we have the next biggest, best, fastest, all of those things, right? But we also live in an age where verification is probably more important than it ever has been. So, in your opinion, how do you balance um, scale or volume and verification when you are trying to grow a campaign?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is important, for a bunch of different reasons. And I guess it also depends on the context in some fashion, whether we're talking about, mass tort cases or mass arbitration cases in the consumer protection context. But I think the thing that I would like to say initially is that most firms, with even speaking in terms of like scalability, it's treating the client relationship like a transaction.
Hmm.
And it's not a transaction, at least for me. I mean, it should be the start of a relationship with a person who has been, potentially harmed. And
Hmm.
so, um,
Agreed.
I like to start with that, as table stakes. Um, and so scaling, and trying to reach as many people as possible, has to be balanced with treating them again like the human beings and individual clients that they are. And so you need to make sure that the quality of the interaction in whatever media it takes, whether it's a phone call, an online, an AI chatbot, or someone, everyone, as a lot of people are quickly using and adopting all the technology that's out there as people should, but we have to make sure that again we don't lose something in that adoption. And so that's number one. I think number two is also, the desire for scale and or speed has to be balanced with, kind of making sure that those clients are getting the care and attention that they need. I mean, I'd say that, kind of speed kills the deal, right? Scalability can kill the deal. Leads that are sitting around for even a couple of hours, um, sometimes go cold. And so, you need to be responsive, receptive, and, continue to kind of provide the human touch, even if you're using technology that's not
Hmm.
human. We can't lose that as we, move into a quickly evolving environment where technology is doing a lot of work that people used to do. And so, I don't mean to evade the question in terms of like the scalability question, but I
Hmm.
think my concerns are the ones I've just articulated, that you have to balance scaling with, kind of handling. And to the extent that that can be done, I'm all in favor of scaling, but it has to be done in a way that's ethical, compliant, and that also maintains, the attorney-client relationship and views these people as people who are your clients and not just, part of your inventory in quotes.
Absolutely. No, I love that. And as you know, I sit on the AWC board for the NLVA, the National Legal Vendors Association, and actually head up the compliance committee. So all of that is near and dear to my heart. We had a very big issue. When I say we, I mean the collective we, with, well, quite frankly, with Camp Lejeune, right? And it ushered in a lot of new things into our space, and not all of those things were great. And so in a perfect world, um, I wouldn't have to sit on the board. I wouldn't have to be part of the compliance committee, right? But we do these things because we're reacting to a situation that happened, right? And we want to keep our industry working in the way that it currently does. And so this next question is it's kind of a piggyback off of something that you've already said. It's the lots questions in lessons learned in ethical sourcing. But what does ethical and compliant claimant sourcing mean to Ross?
Well, I mean, there's there's a bunch of components to answering that question. We can speak to, what the model rules say. Different states have different rules on kind of, runner and capper statutes.
Mm-hmm.
So, I mean, look, I think to me, it means that you're not only, within the four corners of the ethics rules that are applicable to you in whatever jurisdiction that you're practicing, but it goes beyond that for me to, again, how you want to treat your clients. How would you treat these folks if they were sitting across the table from you in your office, or if you met them on the street? And so I think that, I mean, again, legal and ethical compliance is table stakes. That's the beginning, not the end of how at least I view compliance. And to that point, and kind of teeing off of what you just mentioned in terms of our side of the industry, uh, we all get a black eye when there are bad actors out there doing things that are grossly either illegal, unethical. You had the situation with the abuse clients with the downtown LA firm, you know, ginning up, fake cases. I mean, I just wrote an article. I read an article in the New Yorker that caused me to, for the first time, to write a letter to the editor around the story that appeared in the New Yorker a couple of weeks ago about these firms in New Orleans that were doing like these truck cases where they would run into a truck and these lawyers were paying, these marginalized people to go out there and risk their lives to cause truck accidents. So all those things are terrible. And not only are they unethical and illegal, but they provide fodder for the other side, for the insurance
Yep.
companies and for the defense bar to say, yeah, look at these guys. They're all like this. And so, I think we all have a duty because we are, in the business of defending the rights of people who are harmed and unrepresented without the ability to go hire, a white shoe law firm at $1,200 an hour to take their case. So, it's a long answer to your question, but it's, again, compliance is compliance with the rule and the letter of the law is the bare minimum.
Yep. Agreed.
That's my take on it, and maybe
Yeah,
that's
no, you're absolutely right, Ross. It really is. It should be the very bedrock of any conversation or any relationship in this space, and for what everybody does from my side of the table to yours, right? Like if you just do things the right way, the compliant way, you don't have to remember what you said or what you did because you just did the right thing, right? Like
yeah,
it's
no,
a
you're right.
novel idea, but it's pretty simple.
I mean, I'm a big fan of Judge Judy, and she's like, if you're not lying, then you don't have to remember what your story is, right? If
Yep.
you don't need to remember what you told somebody, just do it right.
Yep.
Yeah, and that makes it may take a little more time, might be a little more expensive, but at the end of the day, it's going to be a lot easier than taking some shortcut or, rolling out some half measure.
Yep, absolutely, absolutely. I completely agree with you. So moving into the next section, it's actually one of my favorites, which is defining success and real performance metrics. Um, when do you know a campaign is truly working, and what metrics differentiate between growth and just a temporary lift, in your opinion?
Yeah, I mean, look, being married to an accountant, I guess I can always fall back on the line that the numbers don't lie, the numbers tell a story. And so, I mean, I think, everybody who is deploying resources in a campaign should, again, I mean, and this sounds again trite, but I think that some people treat uh, marketing and marketing spend like, like they're playing craps in Vegas, right? They're going to put, a little bit on red and hope for the best. And so I think that unless you have a plan and have, your own personal metrics in terms of what is success for you and for this campaign, it's impossible as a business owner to decide, was this a good investment? What's the ROI? Is the ROI, am I going to realize it, in the time frame that I expect? And so, it's a little bit of a high level answer to your question, but I think that this is you've got to treat this like any other investment that you're making, whether it's whether you decide to build a new office or buy a new car, whatever it is that you're doing, you've got to really kind of dig down and kind of understand for you what success looks like. Um, and those metrics might be, going back to, is this, are the leads costing me what I would expect they would cost me? I mean, are they, am I being promised something that sounds, too cheap or too good to be true? Can you balance cost with quality? What does that look like? And again, not wanting to treat this like a transaction. And if you really are interested in taking on the role of a lifelong advocate for this particular customer or client, it's going to be worth it in terms of kind of repeat business, repeat referrals, and it's going to go beyond just this one campaign. Anyway, so a multifaceted answer to your question, but that's kind of like my view of the world as it regards this topic.
Absolutely, absolutely. And can you expand a little bit on how you evaluate ROI beyond just a cost per side retainer?
Yeah, I mean, again, it's like, okay, quality of the case is one thing, but again, where does this lead fit within kind of your larger strategy,
Mhm.
your larger game plan in terms of where you're going to put your marketing dollars and in what buckets, right? So, you might be deploying, a one-off campaign involving, a relatively esoteric case that, um, might be super potentially a lucrative thing, but the likelihood of being able to kind of repurpose that spend or have the opportunity to kind of retarget that client probably might not exist. And so I think that's, at least one thing I think about when I'm deploying marketing dollars in that way. Um, and the other thing to think about is, I mean, there's, as the world gets more bifurcated and siloed, it becomes more and more difficult, I think, to reach some people. And so, the world that existed when I started practicing 30 years ago is unrecognizable, right? I mean, there was like a couple of channels where you might have found clients, even though I was on the defense side back then, um, and really had quite a disdain for the plaintiff's bar, particularly the TCPA plaintiff's bar, where you had a bunch of professional plaintiffs that were, you'd see like on the road show. Um, anyway, so it's gotten more complicated too. I think to kind of make these ROI determinations again, kind of given the increased complexity of the world on a daily basis. But those are the things I think about.
Awesome, awesome, awesome. One last question on this side, and I like your insight into this. What's one underrated KPI more firms should track when looking at how a campaign is performing?
Um, yeah, that's an interesting one, Nick. I think that I think one underrated is kind of like the time value of spend. I think that people, are only thinking generally in terms of, okay, kind of percentage uptake and, you know, what's the fallout rate? But it's also, I try to think about like how long is it going to take for me to monetize a particular case or a particular
Sure.
cases. And so I think that's something that some folks might lose sight of, particularly when they're saying, oh, hey, we're getting these types of cases for this price, or everybody's, running toward this particular case. Um, I think that there's when you get into that kind of herd mentality, um, I think people lose sight of the fact that, okay, even if it's like cheaper, more expensive, how long it's going to take before you're going to get that money back. And I think a lot of folks aren't necessarily focused on, particularly in Mass Tort, which has seen, the time horizon expand dramatically, even from the time period when I started working in this side of the business.
Absolutely. And hopefully that marketing spend comes back and it brings some friends with it, right?
100%.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Well, cool. Let's jump into the next section, which is innovation, automation, and evolution. AI has been at the forefront of really everybody is thinking and or talking about it at this point. So I'm assuming that that's probably going to play into your answer to a certain degree. But what marketing innovation or channel are you watching closely in 2026?
Um, well, it's not it's more of an innovation, but and I think I referenced it in answering one of your previous questions, but I think it's, kind of AI for intake and AI for kind of communication with your clients. And so I think that the thing that's great about, some of the AI content generation is that it allows you to have a more, I guess, kind of more regular cadence of communication with your clients.
Sure.
And I think that a lot of clients, I mean, it's one of the biggest complaints that I think is heard among clients of plaintiffs' firms is that, once the case is signed and after the intake's done, they don't hear from you. And, if you let that communication, go fallow for, months, I mean, that's what leads to dual representation or multiple
Hmm.
representation situations because like, oh, I didn't know that actually he was still working on my case, so I called somebody else. And so I think that uh, you know, AI can be utilized to really kind of solve that communications cadence problem. Um, and again, not near novel. I think a lot of folks are doing really innovative things, to provide what feels like more personalized and white glove service and communication to their clients. And so that's the thing that I'm most kind of focused on. And I think the second thing would be just utilizing AI for kind of like for marketing and particularly social media presence. Um, that being said, I think most people still want to hear from a human being, and I think people are getting pretty good at figuring out like, oh, that's not Ross, that's not Nick, that's an AI avatar out there talking. Um, and I think people, you know, are sophisticated enough to understand that, yeah, that's one thing. It's a way to kind of have a more routine presence online. But people still want to hear from you too personally and know that they're talking to a real, warm-blooded human being.
Right. I agree. I agree. So one more question in this, and it's more philosophy. And you talked about it a little bit, but I wanted to, earlier, but wanted to see if you could expand upon it. Do you see the industry shifting from speed first to compliance first when growing or scaling a campaign, or is speed still king?
I mean, for me, I think speed. I think compliance can't be sacrificed for speed, which isn't to say that some firms aren't getting caught in that trap or aren't doing that. I think that one of the other criticisms that's being lodged against our side of the legal business is that you got a lot of money being thrown at plaintiffs' firms for marketing and case acquisition, and what you're losing in that speed and in that money arms race is, some compliance. And I think that, it's just bad. I mean, and it causes all of us significant problems. And I'm thinking now particularly of work I do on the mass arbitration side, which is basically making sure that the people who you're bringing forward are real people that actually have a case, that you've actually conducted the investigation that you should conduct to make sure that this is a real case, that's a colorable case, that's worthy of being filed, that can be filed either in court or in arbitration. And so, even though we've got some really powerful tools that allow us to move really quickly, and to bring along a lot of potential claimants, you've still got to do the diligence to make sure that these are real live people with real live injuries, that you're going to be able to sign your name when you sign that complaint or file your arbitration petition.
Yep, I agree with you. There is no there's a place for AI and for all of those in this equation, but it can never take the place of you, or of your colleagues, right? There are certain things that it can help, but at the end of the day, people do still want to talk to Ross, not Ross's avatar, right? And so I
100%.
totally get that. Yep,
And
completely agree.
Ross is going to be the one who's going to answer the bar complaint, not Ross's avatar. So,
Exactly.
I mean, that's the thing that people have to keep in mind, regardless of like how slick or quick. I mean, and on the flip side, I think that practitioners would be remiss if they're not going to be, getting familiar and adopting the technology that's available. I think that that's also, I'm going to say malpractice. That's the wrong word for it, but you're also not serving your clients well if you're, doing stuff the old-fashioned way. And again, I'm old enough to remember that when I first started practicing law back in 1995, a lot of the partners like, oh, I'm not using this email. Like, that's not a thing I'm going to do. Or, computer research. I mean, it was just like, well, you can choose to not adopt these things or not to get familiar with and understand it, but you're going to do so to your own detriment and to the detriment of your clients, because the guy across the street or, down the road is using AI and he's doing triple time what you're doing if you're relying on, or if you're, declaring yourself a Luddite who's not going to avail yourself of new technology. It's just foolish, and it's not helping anybody.
Yep, I agree. I agree. And that's actually a great segue into this next section, which is the future of legal marketing and claimant acquisition. Only going to have one question in this one because I want to be respectful of your time. What does the future of mass tort claimant acquisition look like to you?
I mean, if I had perfect information and a great answer to that question, I may not be sitting here. No, I think I think we're going to draw upon some of the comments that we both made in answering previous questions, which is, um, ethical, compliant, thoughtful adoption of the full panoply of technologies that are out there. And so, AI is doing amazing things, and I'm not an AI pessimist or doomer. I think is actually a great thing. I think it's going to really help uh, mass tort practitioners do their jobs a lot better in every way. And I missed MTMP this past spring, but in the fall, you sat there and heard from, the giants of our side of the house, Mark Lanier and Pat Matonia, talking about how you can basically be, creating exhibits in real time with AI while you're in a deposition. I mean, things that you couldn't even have thought about doing 5 years ago. And so I think that ethical adoption of all range of AI tools, whether it's for generating exhibits, for creating intake scripts, for double checking, triple checking, your pleadings, for researching case values. You've got great companies out there who've been doing these things for a while, relatively speaking, in the grand scheme of how long AI has been kind of broadly available. Um, it's only going to get better. And I think that, a book I read a couple of years ago made this comment, which is the AI you're using today is the worst AI that you're going to use. I mean, it's going to continue to exponentially
Yep.
improve. Um, and, I don't know what the analog to Moore's law is with regard to AI, but someone's probably coined a term for it. But it's a bit of an arms race, but it's without the kind of the problems of an arms race. And I think that in the same way that I think, Sam Altman predicted a few years ago that AI would allow a single person company to be $1 billion business within a period of time. And that's actually happened. The guy who was
Yep.
selling GLP drugs was profiled in the Times here a few weeks ago. And I think the same thing could be true on the legal side. I think that somebody, maybe somebody listening to this podcast, is going to build $1 billion law firm with, uh, very few resources and very few bodies, and not a lot of capital required. And so I think that's exciting. I think it's an amazing time to be a lawyer. I've been around a while, and I'm grateful to be kind of living through this period. I think that the people who are just getting out of law school now, and I just read something in Bloomberg around, which I think is a very promising thing, which is a lot of new graduates are eschewing, kind of the big law firm life, and would rather work on our side. So that's also a great thing.
Mhm.
Uh, there's no shortage of work to be done. And I think that AI is going to be not great just for legal marketing, but for, case development, case investigation. Access to information has never been more robust than it is today, and it's only going to get better as far as I can view it.
Awesome. I love that. And I completely agree with you. I think that it's changing the landscape for the better, but it's a tool that needs to be wielded with oversight, right? And I think it can definitely work in everyone's favor in that way. So as a 31-year veteran in the legal space as an attorney, which by the way, amazing, that's fantastic. You've learned some things along the way. So this next part is all about leadership, culture, and philosophy, and then we'll wrap up. We have three more questions. What is in your opinion, what is the hardest part of leading a legal team in today's environment?
Um, the hardest part, well, I think, I guess let me think about it. In terms of leadership, I think I think part of one of the biggest challenges as, a leader, of a firm and as a leader, in an industry is I think kind of making people aware, making folks who are kind of new to the legal field, new graduates or recent graduates, um, of kind of like, having, I guess, not just respect for the past, but an understanding of like some of these kind of like old fashioned and quote kind of values, and thinking through the fact that, again, like we talked about before, that these aren't just inventory, these are people. Um, Technology is available to kind of help us do our jobs better. And I think it's just attracting, and training and mentoring the folks who are going to carry this work forward. There's, I think, and I'm not, correct me if this is wrong, I think there's about 1.3 million lawyers in the United States,
That's about
for
right.
330 million people. I mean, that's a pretty not a high ratio, right? So, I think, providing access to representation to legal services, um, is something that the leadership of firms have to be focused on. and helping people understand kind of like, what the obligations are, but also what the opportunities are. And so I think that's the biggest challenge that we face as leaders in this space. Um, but to my answer to the previous question, the good news is that I think a lot of people are interested, and I think the younger generation is really seeing, uh, in every way, shape, and manner, some of the problems that are kind of rising to the surface with a lot of the ways that, corporate America conducts its business, with a lot of collateral damage, a lot of environmental damage, human damage. And so, yeah, I think it's just kind of like motivating people to kind of take up the spite, and do it in the right way, but also understanding that, it's a very noble thing to do. And there's also, a nice living to be made while you're doing it. So,
Absolutely. You took some almost verbatim a statement that I make fairly regularly. Obviously, I would I would love to have gone to law school. I didn't. I chose different things, right? But this scratches an itch for me to be a part of taking on big pharma or whatever entity it might be, because oftentimes when we find these folks for people like you or Michael Watts or Ann Andrews, whatever it might be, we're talking to them on just about their worst day. They took a medicine that they were prescribed, and it did a number on them, or they had a device implanted that was supposed to benefit them and fix whatever was ailing them, and it made it worse, or take it even a step further, maybe they're no longer with us, right? And we're talking to their families, and this it allows in some small way for myself to kind of take up that fight, right? Like I feel like we're doing the right thing, and helping somebody that might not feel like they have a voice. And so I love what you just said, because it is an important fight, and it does, people get really on fire about these things. And I think that in some small way, all of us are trying to make the world a better place while also making a living and providing for our families. So I truly love that. So Russ, there's two more questions. And actually, before we do that, if folks want to get in touch with you, and we can do this again at the end, but if folks want to get in touch with you, what's the best way for them to reach out?
sure. My email is rbuntrock at sweetnamlaw.com, which is SWEETNAM law.com. You can always text me. My personal cell phone number is 202-669-0495. I have a website, wewinsuits.com, is another way to reach me. But yeah, those are my three best channels.
Awesome, 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 and thank you for sharing that. So yeah, just a couple more. How do you foster a culture that values both growth and integrity? I think I know the answer to this, but I'm curious to hear what you're saying.
I guess like anything else you're trying to teach is you've got to model these things, by your own behavior, right? So
Mhm.
you've got to walk the walk, and you've got to make sure that people who you're working with, whether it's on your team or as vendors, understand kind of who you are, what your North Star is in terms of how you conduct your life and your business. And that sounds, I don't know, esoteric, aspirational, maybe like too general to have meaning. But I think that we have to really, behave and lead and show people by example what we expect of them, and what's required, in the organization. And so, I'm lucky to be part of an organization that is mostly people who are, around, there's people younger, there's people that are older. We've all had some pretty unique and interesting experiences. But at the end of the day, and we have a diverse group, but we're all aligned in the way that we want to conduct our practice, and do the right thing and work hard and try to achieve the results that our clients deserve. And so, yeah, I think it's again, nothing I've that can claim original authorship of, but it's just like leading by example and doing the right thing. Also, I guess trying to communicate that like there's no job that's beneath you, right? I mean, there's no job
Mhm.
that is, oh, well, I'm not gonna do that research, or I'm not gonna go, clean out the kitchen and the break room because
Yes.
there's a, rotten egg salad sandwich in there. I mean, we've all got to do whatever we've got to do to service our clients, and achieve the best results we can, in ways that are, compliant and ethical and that go above and beyond, what's expected.
Absolutely, absolutely. And expand upon that and give you some of my philosophy is, um, I, I heard a quote and I live by it. Culture eats philosophy for breakfast. Um, and not philosophy, I'm sorry. Um, eats strategy for breakfast. And not that you can't that you shouldn't have a strategy, because you got to have a game plan, right? If you don't know where you're going, it's not going to work. But having the right folks on the bus is very important, and having like-minded individuals, not carbon copies, not 15 Rosses or 15 Nicks, right? Like it's about having like-minded individuals that have their own perspective, but also understand the greater goal. And I can't even tell you how many times that I've hired somebody and brought them on for a specific job, and then found that 2 weeks in they were a better fit for a different job within the company, but we hired the right person.
Hmm.
And so that's part of the fun for me, is making sure that they're in the right seat on the bus. So I love your answer. So Ross, we'll finish with this. What is one piece of advice that you'd give to firms trying to modernize their marketing and intake operations today?
Well, I guess, um, I'll use a quote that actually, um, my uncle, who I just came back from his service. He was the founder of Waste Management, the trash hauling company. He just passed away at 94 years old. I just
I'm sorry to hear that.
service in South Dakota. Well, I mean, he was a great leader, a great visionary, but his philosophy, in the way that he led his company, I think applies equally to the question you posed with regard to people trying to modernize their processes. Is like, get the right people. I'm not the smartest guy, but I can go find the smartest people and surround myself with them and work together, kind of with the common goal of achieving, the best modern intake client acquisition infrastructure that's going to serve your firm and the way your firm wants to operate or does operate. So I guess it's just, get the right people involved. And if you don't know something, find a subject matter expert who does. Lawyers, I mean, myself included, I think, tend to try to be very self-sufficient, and maybe don't seek out help for whatever reason, whether it's ego, expense, or something different. But yeah, it's like, get the right people involved, know what you don't know, and fill in those gaps with people who do. Because again, even though I've been doing what I do a long time, there's people that are a lot younger and a lot smarter and a lot more agile and can teach me a lot. And I think that, always be willing to learn and be willing to be advised, um, and pay for that advice, because that's the best help you can get. And that's going to be, I think, very key to success in that regard.
Absolutely. I love that. I love that. Well, Ross, thank you so much for being a guest today. And can you give everybody your contact information one more time?
Sure. My pleasure. Thanks again, Nick. It's my email is rbuntrock, RBUNTROCK at sweetnamlaw.com, SWEETNAM law.com. My website is wewinsuits.com, and my cell phone is 202-669-0495.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, Ross, thank you again for being a guest today on the Logic Exchange. I'm your host, Nick Thompson, CRO for Email Agency and Law Logic, as well as the committee chair for the NLBA for the Compliance Committee. Ross, thank you. Always a pleasure. And we'll talk again soon.
Likewise. Thank you.
Absolutely. Thanks, buddy. Talk to you soon.
Bye.
Bye-bye.